This is the moment every composer in the ASCAP television and film scoring workshop has been waiting for. Some with trepidation, some with great expectation, and all just a little bit nervous before stepping onto the conductor's podium to work with the best studio musicians LA has to offer. However, before this moment can happen, a few other events have to take place. Hi, I'm John Debney. I'm standing at the very same podium where great names in film music have recorded iconic scores. Here, right here on the historic Newman scoring stage at 20th Century Fox. Before each year's class steps onto that hallowed podium, they must first be chosen from a field of almost 300 international applicants. The judging process starts with a group of working composers who listen to every application and choose their favorites. ASCAP's Mike Todd and Jennifer Harmon, along with workshop host and mentor Richard Bellis, then painstakingly review the top scores from each judge and select the final 12 participants. Recently, we invited 5 of our successful alumni to meet up at the Eastwood scoring stage on the Warner Brothers lot to share some stories about their experiences. All agreed that the workshop was absolutely instrumental in launching their careers.
How many times did you actually have to submit before being accepted? And what was your reaction to the acceptance or perhaps rejection?
Well, I was very lucky to be selected the first time I submitted, but it almost wasn't the case. When I found out about the workshop, I was living in Canada, and I was a little worried that the workshop might not be open to participants from all around the world. So I tried my best to sort of pretend I was an American. And I got an American phone number with this complicated call forwarding system, and none of it worked. And so I didn't realize, and same with mailing address, I didn't realize I got accepted. If I hadn't made the call just to make sure that I didn't get in, I wouldn't have known.
I applied at least, 5 times before I got in. Each year I would usually get, 1 or 2 years I didn't get into the top, because they tell you whether you're in the top percentage, top 10%. But I just realized after the first time I got into that top 10%, I said, wow, I was in the top 10%, but I still didn't get in. I said, okay, I just need to keep trying to do this. And when I got in, it was a mix because I was extraordinarily happy and excited for it, but I was also like, finally, they let me in. They let me do it.
The chosen 12 come from all over the world to the ASCAP offices in Hollywood to start a month of preparation and training. The workshop is provided free of charge by ASCAP and the ASCAP Foundation. For many, it will prove to be a life-changing event.
My real-world experience after graduating from USC was temping, but I needed to get real-world music experience. So having the workshop poised right after the graduation year set me up for what would follow right after the workshop is when I became assistant to Hans Zimmer.
I found the film scoring workshop to be like a stamp of approval. When you meet other people in the industry, they're like, and you tell them you went through that workshop and they spoke at it as well, they're just like, well, you must be good if you went through that workshop, and they take you more seriously. And I think it just allows you to make that connection a little bit more easily.
All right, you're expected to orchestrate and conduct your own cues. And deadlines for turning in your sketches and your scores are absolutely crucial. This workshop is not intended to prepare you for low-budget indie films, but rather to become a major player within our industry. And the mere fact that you've been selected gives us every indication that you have the potential to do that, to become an A-list composer. All right, so this is a session.
On the first day of the workshop, participants meet their mentor, Emmy Award-winning composer Richard Bellis, who will let them know what will be expected of them during the month-long program. He discusses the current state of our industry and gives them an idea of how to value or price their work. Almost every skill and craft involved in making a film has a team, a department, cinematography, lighting, wardrobe, sound effects. But all too often, there's a misconception that composers work alone, a virtual one-man band. The music editor is one of the most valuable team members a film composer can have. He or she plays an essential role in the music production of every major film. So we get Michael Ryan, one of the best, to work one-on-one with our composers.
I think it's important for young composers to understand the role of a music editor in the composition and creation of a score for a film or television project. The understanding that a music editor brings through their work creating a temp score and relating that information to a composer is very beneficial. The music editor has a very important job in trying to find out what the filmmakers are trying to achieve musically and where that music is going to go, because that becomes the template for what the composer who's going to do the final music does with their music. Most of the time when there's going to be music played in production, whether it's in a dance club or a live group performing, what the music editor does is create a click or thump track that goes along with that. And when they begin shooting that scene, they play the music as they roll the cameras and everybody's dancing, everybody's in tempo. And then when it's time for the dialogue for those characters, they turn off one side of the music, which actually has the sound, and the other side has this click track, which is going through a large subwoofer and creates this low frequency thump, so that everybody in the background can continue to dance in tempo while they're able to get a clean recording of the production dialogue. And then when they're done with that dialogue, they'll turn the actual music back up, everybody's still in tempo, and then when they go to cut that later in post, everything is consistent in whatever takes they use.
The composers are randomly assigned one of 4 clips from a feature film. This gives them each a scene with A-list writing, acting, and directing, a perfect opportunity to create a wonderful cue.
So what scene did you get, and what was your reaction when you got that scene?
My scene was Anna and the King, which thrilled me because it was the main title. And I think we all get into this business dreaming of writing a beautiful theme. The funny thing is, I think we don't usually dream about scoring comedic action as much. And when we were given the offer to trade scenes that night, the only people that stayed behind were the people that had Nutty Professor clumps, the one comedy clip. And I guess they would rather do a main title or a big theme. But looking back, those were some of the most impressive cues of the whole workshop.
I had the notebook, and nobody else wanted the notebook in my group. And I somehow ended up on a trade for it, but I thought it was a beautiful scene. And one of the probably the most interesting moments of that was there was a hug in there, and I wanted to play them coming together dramatically. And I did play it a little too dramatically, and I hit it right on the nose. And I remember Richard asking me, he said, okay, give me a hug. And so I gave him a hug, and he goes, okay, when you hug somebody, when do you feel it? When do you feel that? And he goes, you might hug somebody and you physically touch them here, but when you feel the hug is immediately after. It's kind of like that squeeze that happens is the emotion. And so I ended up writing my cue to actually land more on that emotion. It was a huge learning moment for me.
Producers Mike Todd and Jennifer Harmon are charged with lining up an impressive list of professional composers, studio executives, music attorneys, and agents as guest speakers.
So the thing I've noticed with composers working for the first time with an orchestra, the biggest problem is the problem of balance. How do you balance this orchestra? You have 4 groups in the orchestra. You have the strings, the winds, the brass, and the percussion. And it's in that order that you want to use them. The strings are the mainstay of the orchestra. You can listen to them longer than any other group. There's more music written for strings than any other group. The next group are the winds, flutes, oboes, clarinets, and bassoons. When you combine the winds with the strings, and this is something that a lot of people don't have clear, is basically what you're doing is you're making the strings thicker. So if you take like one flute and you put it against, say, the first violins, or you put it with the first violins, the violins will absorb the flute, but the flute will lend its quality and thicken up slightly the sound of the violins. You add 2 flutes, now you can hear the flutes. You still hear the violins. You put in 3 flutes, now you're starting to crowd the violins. Then you go to the brass. The brass is a very dynamic group, and what the brass does is it lends a lot of vitality, a lot of rhythmic vitality, and a lot of mass to the orchestra. And then to this massive musical salad, you add the percussion, the pepper in the salad. And with these 4 groups, if you do it right, and if you balance it correctly, now you've got a score.
I would say the biggest way to get educated on orchestration is hearing your cue being played back to you. And I remember in preparing my piece, you really should print it out and look at the score itself to really see what's going on with the orchestration, because the MIDI can really lie, and especially if you have really good samples, you can convince yourself that this sounds great, but it could actually indeed be unplayable. And really, we have the best musicians at our disposal, so if they can't play it, then you have certainly made it too difficult.
During the course of the workshop, we have various industry speakers that come in. Were there any particular tips or lessons or maybe relationships that developed from the people that spoke during your year?
I think the most important part about having people come in to speak with the ASCAP workshop participants is when we're given the opportunity to interface with the people who on day-to-day produce film music, the music executives, the music editors, the scoring mixers, the orchestrators. When we have an opportunity to meet them, we start to understand how a film score is made from the perspective of not just someone sitting in a dark room trying to make it. So the ability to understand film music production is something that I really gained from the ASCAP film scoring workshop.
As a composer, more so than I think other musicians in your training, we spend all the time by ourselves. And the workshop enforces that we are not isolated, we are a community. And as community members and now leaders having gone through this and being successful at it, it's important to take care of that. The musicians, the fabulous musicians we have in LA, our teams, our music editors, and our orchestrators, and how to keep that a healthy, viable choice.
I think what a director wants to see in a composer that they work with is a spirit of cooperation and somebody who can, who's flexible and who can course correct and be egoless about it. And that's a really hard thing for an artist to do, is to take them, to be thick-skinned and to take themselves out of it. The composers who are some, you know, the ones that I'm most excited to work with or that I look up to the most are the ones who have this amazing ability to just make changes with a smile on their face, and just because they're asked to. Conversely, I've seen composers kind of crash and burn because they dig in and they say, this is the right piece of music and you're crazy for telling me that it's not, and I can't change it and I can't make it better. And it's just like, as soon as you get to that point, you may as well just sort of, you know, call it quits.
I loved having the executives, and just because we were able to have good conversations with them, and it took a lot of that mystery out of it, to be honest. Like, it was just like, oh, this is just another person, you know, and you learn what their responsibilities are. They're telling you, well, this is what I do to produce a score, and this is how I work with music supervisors here, and this is how I work with composers, and how we come together. And just hearing that from their mouths, it took a lot of the intimidation out. So once, and I'm sure all of us since ventured on and now we work with these executives, there's no more like fear around it or any mystery around it. It's just like, just try to do the best job you can, and yeah.
All right, so when the director asks, what do you think of the temp score? Your answer might be, it's incredible. I love Berlioz. Do we have that kind of budget? Because I would love to do that for you. So what you've done with that is that you've given a very positive answer. You've also opened up the possibility of a negotiation about budget and a conversation about what it is the filmmaker likes about Berlioz. Is it the classical setting? Is it the scope? Is it the tempo?
When you're in a spotting session and you hear a piece of temp score and you think, oh, that's really great. And then they turn around and say, we hate this. You go, yes, so I can see. I won't do anything like that.
Joanne Kane Music Services is the place that John Williams and Hans Zimmer send their scores to be prepared for the scoring stage. And this is where our composers will have their scores copied, duplicated, and taped for the session.
It's kind of like a work of art, preparing the music. You make it look so beautiful. And I know that the musicians really appreciate that, because it's easier for them to read, and they know that it makes them respect your music more, that they can follow it more easily. So I definitely took that as a lesson for the future, to just keep the quality up to the very end of preparing the music. It's just as important as the music is how it's displayed.
Oh, don't take photos of the cue sheets. No. Really bad idea. It all comes out of a conversation you have with the director or with the movie in a way. You go away and you write what you think is appropriate to this movie. and you play it to somebody, the director, the editor, for the first time, and either it communicates or it doesn't. You know, and it's not their fault if they don't get it. It's not even because it's a great tune or a rotten tune or whatever, but it's the whatever, you know, the symbiosis between the images in the story and the theme. Do they create another something that's better than what was there before?
The final preparation is an exercise in podium procedure. This gives the participants a chance to practice conducting on the same spot from which they'll be working with the 61-piece orchestra in just a few days. And then the time finally does come. The scoring stage is ready, the harp and percussion have been delivered, the librarian has passed out the music. The scoring mixer and the score reader look over their scores, and the orchestra starts to tune. The first brave composer takes the podium, and as the film starts to roll, he raises his baton and